Lovely to be here today, and thanks for the invitation. And we, as a university and as a school of education, we're really proud to sponsor this event. As soon as we heard about it on Twitter, we knew this was the kind of thing we wanted to get involved with. It's part of our responsibility as a school of education. It was really interesting to hear from Elizabeth about the personal histories and how this informs their understanding of bias. I grew up in a naval town. I won't name it, that's what I'm going to say next. It was very, very white, almost exclusively, very tough place to grow up, very working class. And I never experienced any bias that was unconscious. It was very, very explicit. Racism was just part of the dialogue, the everyday dialogue, whether it was from our family, when you went out to the pub, wherever it happened to be. I never really experienced or witnessed the effects of anything I thought might be unconscious until I came into education. And for me, that was the real sad indictment of what started my teaching career in South East London. Predominantly black students, and I looked around the department I was working in, and there was one black member of staff out of 40. So I started thinking that there's something here, there's something that's not as explicit as I was used to growing up. So I started doing some reading, and that's when I had the first tumbleweed moment around unconscious bias. I said at the department meeting, how about we start doing some training on unconscious bias? The first total silence in the department meeting. It was the tumbleweed moment. It just, okay, yeah, we'll look at that. But it was when you come into education, and that's when I started to understand it was something that was far more systemic than I was used to. It was something that really was unconscious, that wasn't spoken about. The Equality Challenge Unit give a nice definition of what it is. So, it refers to a bias that we're unaware of, which happens outside of our control. It's a bias that happens automatically and triggered by our brain making quick judgments and assessments of people and situations. This is a key point, influenced by our background, cultural environment, personal experiences. And there's a tension there between how much of this is individual and how much of this is something systemic, something in society. And as you go through, and depending on the context you come across unconscious bias, one of those is weighted over the other one, and for different reasons. It's well documented. I don't think there's anyone who could now say that unconscious bias doesn't have a real impact in organisations and in society. Here's just a few examples. I mean, as I was going through it, there are literally hundreds of studies now. Most of them since about 2000, very little before that. So there's the one that we all know about. Applicants who don't have British sounding names were less likely to be shortlisted. And I've seen this. As I've moved into management in colleges and universities, you see this all the time. You see it in the shortlisting committees. You see the consistently shortlisting of people with names like mine. Male applicants for science roles rated as more competent than equally qualified females. This is another common one, especially in the sciences where much of this research has been done. Both male and female psychologists more likely to employ male early career researchers. And if you look at the statistics in universities in particular, it is stunning. When you look at early career researchers, mostly male, mostly white still. McConnell and Leibold in 2001. This was a study that looked at the difference between black and white researchers. And they documented the differences in body language, the way that the people in the interviews responded to black or white researchers. And then the last one is probably the scariest for me, that doctors are more likely to prescribe effective drugs to white rather than black patients. And that's terrifying. Education, obviously, the inequalities and the bias that's in education is one thing. But when you're talking about effective drugs, that takes you to a whole different level. So there's a view that unconscious bias is inevitable, and this is a social psychology perspective. So this basically goes back to our origins and the fight and flight. If we come across a stimuli in our environment, perhaps a wild animal, another person, whatever it happens to be, there's two types of attitudes that are triggered. You've got the explicit one, there's the deliberate one. When you have time to think of a reasoned response, you have time to weigh the costs of your interaction within that environment. And there's the implicit one, the one that is that automatic response. It's about immediacy, it's automatic, it's inherent, and it's uncontrolled. Moore in 2009, this is the connection here. So unconscious bias is rooted in stereotypes and prejudice. And the key thing here, in the quote from Moore, it's part of normal socialisation. And the word normal keeps cropping up in unconscious bias. When you look at the research, it's normal. It's something, it's inevitable, it's just there. But then the last, if you look at Eastern and Regard, most human decisions are made emotionally and then we collect or generate the facts to justify them. And if you want to really understand unconscious bias, as far as I see it, that's the key phrase. We react, and then we justify it. In shortlisting, we read, mostly white panels will read the applicants, and then they'll make the decision, and then they'll justify it. This person hasn't quite got the experience. This degree isn't quite as good as this degree. It's that kind of rationalisation post. Unconscious bias as well is a means of actually perpetuating prejudice. Now this was, the researchers admit they were quite stunned by this, they hadn't anticipated it. So if you look at most unconscious bias training, which has become its own industry now, if you just Google it, so it communicates to everyone that's involved in unconscious bias that it's just natural, it's just within us, it's innate. And it's held by the vast majority of people. Dugan and Thomas Hunt found they did an experiment with some managers. So they got two types, they separated the managers into two groups. With one group, they said unconscious bias and stereotypes are just common, everyone's got them. The other group, they said actually they're rare. Not everyone holds these stereotypes. And then they were given the same job interview transcript, where a candidate was applying for a job and asked for more money than the actual salary was specified. One group were told that it was a female applicant, one group were told that it was a male applicant. Now the group that had been told that stereotypes are common, 28% less likely to hire a female candidate. So although it was presented as part of understanding unconscious bias, it actually made it worse. Because if you're told that unconscious bias is just normal, it's just inevitable, then so what? If everyone's biased, why not me? Why should I make an effort if everyone is biased? And it's that phrase again, the naturalness, the inevitability of unconscious bias. But it can be a means of addressing discrimination, but it depends how it's used. There was another experiment, Dugan and Thomas Hunt did a follow-up. And here they became far more prescriptive. Rather than just saying that it's common or it's rare, they actually told the managers that the vast majority of people try to overcome their stereotypical preconceptions. So at the beginning they were being very prescriptive. They were saying it's normal, unconscious bias is normal, but it's also normal to overcome them. And this eliminated the bias that they found in the other experiment. So managers were 28% more interested in hiring a female candidate, and they judged as 25% more likely. Just by the element of prescription at the beginning, it cancelled out unconscious bias. The video gives us another key point. Unconscious bias is only overcome when there's a motivation to overcome it. And that's the key point as you go through the sessions today. If everyone understands that unconscious bias exists, we know it's natural, we know it's inevitable, but there has to be a motivation to overcome. And that's the gap, that's the big gap where racism exists. So the implication is that you have to overcome discrimination, you have to prescribe. But it's also unrepeatable. You can only be told about unconscious bias once. Because once you've told about it, then it's your responsibility as an individual or as a group or as an organisation to do something about it. You can't keep discriminating and say, well, it's still unconscious bias. I know it was unconscious bias 10 years ago. Okay, now statistics have become more diverse, but it's still unconscious bias now. You can only be told about it once, because then it is our personal responsibility. Then it's become implicit bias. An implicit bias is a far more critical approach. It's not just about saying it's very natural, it's very ordinary. It's about saying that we need to recognise and acknowledge our biases and find ways to mitigate their impact on our behaviour and decisions. And that's the key point. We've taken on Lee Becker, we've created the first Professor of Race and Education. And I was delighted to get Shirley N Pipe, who's, the kind of background that she comes with as an international researcher in the area of race and higher education in particular. It's just incredible. So it was great to get her. So when I was invited to do this talk, I started talking to Shirley about it. And she's an insomniac, she won't mind me saying. And so she was up, I got this email the next morning, I came in from, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and she was saying, I've just been thinking about this. And so we started this email dialogue. Working at universities is a fantastic thing, because now it's a way of starting to write research. You're getting that dialogue. So we started thinking that unconscious bias, if you say that it's just part of our brains, if you say it's within our brains, you're ignoring the fact that it's systemic. You're kind of taking responsibility away from society, away from organisations and away from institutions. So if you use it as an explanation for white racism, it's like saying there's a fault within white racist brains. It's faulty wiring. There's something gone wrong. It's just part of normal socialisation, going back to the research again. So from this perspective, it's almost an excuse. It's absolution, it's forgiveness. It's saying that racism is not the fault of white race, it's the fault of their faulty genetics, their faulty brains, their faulty socialisation. It moves the responsibility from an individual, from society and organisations into just bad DNA, bad genetics, bad upbringing. It's a means of forgiving. It's a means of absolving. If you look at organisations now, I won't name the university, but I was at a university recently. We was talking about diversity, and, you know, because of the work we're doing. And I was speaking to a very senior manager, and he said, we're really addressing diversity. We've really got the hang of this now. We know what we're doing. Okay, what's the evidence for that? He said, 85% of our staff have done the 10-minute online training on unconscious bias. And I sat there. This was my tumbleweed moment. I'm just sitting there thinking, how do I respond to this? So I said the only natural thing. I said, what's the impact? Well, we've got 85% of our staff have completed that. Yeah, okay, but is there any impact of that? And they had no idea. HR departments are fantastic. You know, you've got to love them. They're probably the most hated department in every organisation. But they put on unconscious bias training with no understanding of what the impact is going to be. No understanding. When you speak to a director of HR and you have to say, you are aware that unconscious bias training can actually make prejudice worse. And again, it's this, yeah, but we've got 85%. You're not getting this, Damien. There's 85% of our staff have completed the online training. See, we need to think about unconscious bias critically. Maybe inevitable from the social psychology perspective. It may be natural in us as part of our fight or flight. That doesn't mean we don't have a responsibility for addressing it. And if it can only happen once, there is no more absolution or forgiveness after that. You're aware of it, there is no more forgiveness. I'll leave a final thought from Shirley. The question is, though, who gains from clinging to the idea of unconscious or implicit bias as something that can't be helped, and who loses? And more than any other quote, I think she'd be proud of listening to a lot of the journal articles. This is the way to reflect on unconscious bias, especially as we're perceiving in education in that context, whether it's primary schools, secondary schools, universities, colleges. Who benefits? And who benefits most from the idea that it can't be helped? Who gets absolution? Who gets forgiveness? Who gets responsibility for addressing unconscious bias? Who gets responsibility for moving it forward, for making sure that our organisations do reflect the communities that they serve? I'll leave you with that. These are all the references. It's worth going on and doing some more reading around it, especially the one about health, as I was saying, just the most terrifying research I've ever read. Thank you very much.